So the cabinet that we installed didn't have drawers, but you could add them pretty easily. And I'm going to show you 2 ways to make drawers really quickly. But before you'd make drawers, you'd want to modify your face frame during the construction phase. And basically all you'd want to do is take an extra rail and install it to separate the area where the drawers are going to be from other drawers or from other doors. All right? So you'd make that prep while you're building your face frame. Now let me show you 2 methods to make drawers. For our first drawer construction method, we're going to revisit the domino. The construction technique is just like that we used in the carcass construction. So let me go grab the domino joiner and I'll walk you through the process. A lot of folks are familiar with dovetail drawers, and those are usually made with hardwood. But for our drawers, we're going to use 1/2 inch thick plywood, and this comes pre-finished, pre-banded, and pre-grooved for our drawer bottom. So it really takes a lot of the work out of the equation for me. Now it's just a case of joining these edges together with the domino. And that process is going to be just like we used for the cabinet carcass, except a little bit smaller. So this is the domino that we use to connect our cabinet carcass and our face frame. This is the domino that we're going to be using to create our drawer. And these are the corresponding bits. So all I have to do is swap out the bit out of the domino and install a smaller one. It's really versatile. We're flush at the top, we're flush at the outside corner. That's 1/4 of a drawer. You repeat that process 3 more times, you've got yourself a drawer. So now let me show you another technique for real quick joinery to join the corners over at the router table. All right, I've got my router table all set up to cut my rabbets. And I'm going to cut them using a standard straight bit. Now, my rabbit's only going to get cut in the sides of my drawer, so I'm going to take the front and the back, and I'm going to set that off to the side. Right. Now, let me talk a little bit about the adjustment that I made here. First of all, I raised my bit height, so it's about half the thickness of my drawer stock. And then I set my fence back so that the apex of the cutter's diameter is even with the thickness of the material that I'm using for my drawer stock. The last thing I did was I set my feather board down to give me nice consistent downward pressure as I make that cut. Now, another thing that I want to remember when I'm making this cut is that these pieces are a little narrow to try and run on their own. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take both pieces, both sides, butt them together, giving me a much more stable surface as I travel past the bit. And to help reduce tear out, I'm going to make sure that the banded top edge of each side is facing one another during the cut. And that's it for cutting the joinery from my pinned rabbet joint. So I've cut a simple plywood bottom for our drawer, and the last thing to do is assemble the joints and pin them in place. I'm just going to set my drawer bottom in the groove. a little bit of glue on the exposed surface. There we go. And that rabbet does a really good job of positioning everything together. The drawer goes together really quick. Now, even though this is plywood, you've got to remember that every other layer here that I'm gluing is long grain. So there's still a fair amount of long grain to long grain surface here. There we go. All right. And to keep that joint together, I'm going to use 23 gauge pin nails. That's it. That's a drawer. And all of the parts that you're going to use to make your drawer, they're going to be dependent upon your cabinet size, its height, the type of hardware that you're going to use to suspend the drawer, whether it's side mount or an under mount. There's a few variables that are going to go into it, but the construction's really straightforward. What I have in front of me is a cross section of a typical 32 millimeter cabinet. Now, all the details of what makes up a true 32 millimeter cabinet aren't really important, but one thing you'll really benefit from is knowing that this front hole array is always placed on a 37 millimeter setback from the front edge of the cabinet. What that allows you to do is mount any of this hardware that's designed for 32 millimeter cabinets, and it all is, into this hole array. So whether you're talking about a hinge mounting plate, these really straightforward white epoxy slides, the heavy-duty side mount slides, or the undermount slides that are really common today that have integrated soft close, all of those mounting holes land exactly on 37 millimeter setbacks. So you'll know exactly where to set your slide or your hinge plate, and it'll be set perfectly, and you won't have to figure out what's going on. You just need to keep it level. And if you don't like 37 millimeter, it's roughly 1 7/16 of an inch. Let's take a look at a few other options for attaching a cabinet to a wall. Our built-in project has a solid back, which meant we could put a screw anywhere as long as it was going to sit into a stud. But a more common way is to actually have stretchers, or some folks will call these nailers, that go into the cabinet. In this case, we've got a nailer at the bottom of the cabinet, a nailer at the top of the cabinet, and that allows us to use a much thinner back. Now, there's pros and cons to this system. The pro is we get to use a lot less of the thicker material and make a lighter cabinet. The con is we have to make sure that our fastener, those 3-inch long installation screws, actually go through the nailers in order to support the cabinet. Another method of hanging wall cabinets that's really popular with woodworkers is a French cleat. The French cleat is just a piece of wood cut at an angle that mates to or actually drops onto another angled piece of wood that's mounted to the wall. Another method for hanging cabinets, which is really popular in Europe and is also making headway in the States, is a variation of the French cleat called the suspension rail. Basically, it's two parts. We have this mechanism, which mounts inside the cabinet, and this part protrudes through the back. And then we have a suspension rail that's mounted on the wall behind the cabinet. This mechanism mounts to the top of the rail, and then I'm able to adjust the height of my cabinet or how far it protrudes from the wall through these two screws. It makes hanging a cabinet, leveling it, and getting it perfectly plumb really simple.